Welcome to the Contagious Code podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome.
I'm Tejas Kumar, and I'm an AI engineer at IBM, previously at Spotify, Vercel, Zeta, and more. Today on the podcast, my guest is Isaac Akinsete. Isaac is a licensed personal trainer, a CrossFit trainer, and a professional soccer or football player. He is even in the FIFA game in PlayStation. Um, Isaac, in this episode, talks to us about how we can be healthier and optimize our health, specifically if we're desk workers. So if we're spending 8, 12, 16 hours a day at a desk, he talks through how does that actually affect your body, and spoiler, it's not good. And then we talk about how we can offset that with very actionable things, going from if we have no gym and equipment to if we have some gym to should we do CrossFit or should we do traditional gym? We get into the details, and Isaac very clearly knows his stuff. I mean, the guy mentions all kinds of anatomical terms, and I try to keep up with him, but honestly, he is on another level. In this episode, you're going to learn, if you work at a desk, how to optimize and maximize your health and longevity and vigor so that when you're at age 90 or 100 plus, you may have much better chances of playing catch with your grandchildren, maybe even your great grandchildren, right? At least I don't want to grow old alone, but I want to grow old in a healthy way with vigor so I can really maximize life even in advanced age. And this episode sets us up for that. Towards the end, Isaac also talks about spiritual health and psychological health in regards to self-talk and how that can affect us, whether we lean into challenge or avoid it. He talks about negative self-talk and how that can really, over the long term, be bad for us. Kind of no surprise there. And also spiritual health, the role of God, and so on, and all of this. If you're not a desk worker, but still a human being, health is still important for you. And so, regardless of your background, regardless of who you are and what you do, this episode has meaningful takeaways for you. This episode is also a continuation of the first episode in this season, all the way back to early January, where we talked about how to optimize, how to engineer your way to better health. Because the theme of this podcast is we take sort of engineering mindset and principles and apply them to everyday life for better outcomes. That episode was a solo episode, meaning it was just me talking based on all of the peer-reviewed research I consulted. But of course, I'm not a health guy. I'm somewhat healthy, but this is not my profession. And so this episode is sort of a spiritual successor to that, where Isaac, who is a professional in the field, who has studied it in university, who has done the research, will come and correct me where I was wrong and give you the most accurate and best possible takeaways to engineer your way to better health. And so, with all of that, we really hope you enjoy this episode and come away different. You know, the hope is that you come away different. You come away with something unlocked in your life that changes your life for the better. All of this, of course, is totally free and separate to my day job. And the way you can make this sustainable is through sponsors and partners. Let's take a moment and acknowledge one of them now. The Contagious Code podcast is partnered with Code Crafters. Code Crafters is a really great way to get into coding or get better at coding if you're already in coding. The way it works is you choose a programming language, something like Python, JavaScript, etc. And then you choose a popular developer tool, something like Git or Docker or Redis. And what they do is they teach you the programming language and then they teach you how to build the tool with the programming language. So you get 2 for 1. You learn the tool and the programming language. It's a really great thing. They have a generous free tier, but if you want to start paying, you get a pretty big discount if you follow the link in the show notes. That's tej.as/codecrafters. The Contagious Code podcast is always on the lookout for more interesting partnerships and sponsorships. One, to make the podcast sustainable, but also because we believe that there's a ton of great products out there that we want to support. And so if you're interested in sponsorship, please do reach out. There's links in the show notes. And also, you just go to tej.as and you should find some contact information there. For now, thanks for sticking around. Here's my discussion with Isaac Akinsete. Isaac Akinsete, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tejas Kumar. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Man, I'm so excited to have you for a number of reasons. Obviously, I've looked up to you for months with regards to fitness and so on. And so many listeners here are people who I think struggle with fitness because they all, like, many of us sit 8, 9, 12, 16 hours a day sometimes. And you know, I associate you with not that, right? You're constantly moving, constantly coaching. So I'm excited to dive into all things health, fitness, mobility, stretching, etc. today. To get started, I'd love it if we can just spend a couple sentences talking about you, who you are,
Sure.
your background, your passions, and what led you to fitness and even soccer and all of that today.
Sure. Let's get into it. So, my name is Isaac Akinsete. I'm 23 years old, 24 now. Oh my goodness,
Getting
24.
old, bro.
Yeah, it was my birthday like a month ago. I completely forgot. Getting older. I'm actually a football player. I've played professionally at the highest level. Currently not, but working towards that again. I've actually grown up on sports and exercise. So I've been playing football since I was like 7 years old, I want to say. So since then, I don't think I've stopped playing actually.
Wow.
I used to always play in like teams. So let's say I was 7, I'd play with the under 10s. So like the 10-year-olds. And that was kind of my background growing up playing football. Before I joined academy teams, on scholarship in university for sports, playing at high level football. And throughout all of this time, I started learning more about gym and fitness. I think it was when I was 12 that I actually started working out, or 13, because we were in the academy setup, and we had a strength and conditioning coach, and he would educate us from the age of 12 on, hey guys, you need this, you need this, you need to be stronger in this area. And it was never a case of like, oh, let's do bicep curls, but it was always a case of like functional fitness.
Yeah.
So how do we get the best out of our body? How do we get our body to function the best way, the most powerful way? How do we become better athletes? How do you run faster? How do you prevent yourself from becoming injured? So this is like the training that we were getting since we were 12 years old. And from 12 years old, I'm so blessed and honored because I've stayed in academy setups till I was, I don't know, like 22 or something, where I always had a strength and conditioning coach. So someone like educated who studied these things in university, they teach, to coach. And also because of the way I was as a teenager, I think at 12, we would work out in the gym once a week. I think once I was like 15 and 16, allowed to go to the gym, I was going 5-6 days a week. So I had to do my own research on like, okay, I want to get stronger. I want to become bigger. So I basically had to do my own research on going to the gym like 5-6 times a week on like what exercises are good, why am I doing what I'm doing, what muscles am I working, which translated then into university when I was 17, because I studied sports science, health performance science in the University College Dublin and UCD in Dublin, which was like, it's one of the top universities in Ireland. That's where I also had my sports scholarship, but I chose to study sports science. Well, I say chose, it's my second choice. I wanted to study medicine. But also I was like, this is like a cool second.
Yeah.
Because I'm still learning about the sport I'm doing. I'm playing football. I'm learning now the biomechanics side, the anatomical side, all of these little components that I didn't actually know. Even the sports psychology side, crazy. Sports psychology is really interesting. That was one of my favorite subjects in university. But just learning all of these things, and now I'm in Germany, and now I get a chance to put these things into practice as like a fitness coach, as a fitness trainer, working in Beat 81, coaching, instructing my own classes, or working with Starling Performance, coaching people, group classes again, and also individual personal training. So these are all things all the information I've learned, I've gotten a chance to put into practice now, and it's really fun. It's really exciting.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that intro. And there's so many layers to this. When I was younger, first I have some things I want to say about this. Number one, I love that you got into this at age 12. Because I got into my thing, which is programming, at age 8. And so I think like when we start things at this age, man, I wonder if that's when you discover like this is what I'm made to do. This is going to be my career down the line. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But you also said you started this when you were 12. Bro, when I was 12, I was raised in a society that said, oh, if you like exercise, if you lift weights, or if you do things like this when you're 12, you're going to have
stunted growth.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna be short. You're gonna be a short king. And thankfully, I'm like in height at least above average than India. But there's a lot of people who are scared of that. So maybe there's people listening here who are like wondering, hey, what age should I start? Maybe I have children. Maybe am I too old to start, or am I too young to start? Like, what would you say to that?
Honestly, when it comes to like bodybuilding and weightlifting, I understand the concerns around like children, but especially because you're at a place where your spine is also still growing. So you need to also be careful in exactly what you're doing. like there are a lot of like guidelines and precautions for like children and training. I think it's a safe thing when done correctly. So for, if let's say for example a 12-year-old, they want to begin exercise and hey, I want to get stronger, I would start honestly with more of a calisthenics foundation, so more of a body weight foundation. So start with your push-ups, start with your squats, start with your pull-ups. You can also lift weights. It's fine. But I would like stay away from like going, I'm going to go for my 1 rep max now.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for this. Like, chill. It's okay, man. You're going to grow. You're still in the growing phase, you know? So I would always like think about that because it can stunt your growth.
Yeah.
Like a lot of children who are like, oh, I'm going to go for my 1 rep max and they're going crazy. They're lifting weights above their head. They are like ultimately stunting their growth over
Really?
time.
So that's a thing. Like
It is a thing. It's not like completely false. It just doesn't always happen. It's
Right.
like when there's a possibility of this happening.
yeah,
So we're going to try and avoid the possibility of that happening.
it's the safer choice. And there's
Absolutely.
also safer alternatives like calisthenics.
Yes, exactly. There's no issues with that, you know. As long as you're resting enough after every training session, like you're good.
Yeah, and I mean kids,
Cover quick, man.
they do, but they also do calisthenics naturally, right? Like I think
true.
most kids will like jump around, do monkey bars. Like it's sort of the natural way to train.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
fun. You take a kid to the park and they're going crazy and boom, 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 boom.
yeah.
I used to love that as a kid.
Used to.
I sucked at it. I'm saying used to. Like just on the monkey bars,
Yeah.
for example. I would love to, like, whenever I would always try it and I sucked at it. I was wondering why I sucked at it because I wasn't very strong at the time that I was trying, you know? I was
Yeah.
still a bit younger. And now if I go, I'm like, yeah, muscle up.
Yeah.
It's like really different.
Yeah.
But you also asked me what age is too old.
Yeah.
And there is no age that's too old to train or to work out. You know, like honestly, there is no age.
So you just have to be a little bit, obviously, like the bones are weaker, the ligament, things are weaker when you're
Yeah,
older. So
absolutely.
you have to be maybe a little bit careful.
Yeah, for sure. You need to be cautious, but there is no age that's too old. Like if I'm not going to tell an 80-year-old man now, hey man, go and jump on this like 70 centimeter box, because that's unrealistic. But you also need to be cautious. What are the things that you need to focus on at that age?
Yeah.
So if I'm training with a 70 or 80-year-old person, my focus is going to be more on stability. So how am I going to make your joints more stable? Your knees, your ankles, your hips, those are the things because we want to prevent falling.
Yeah.
And then like the accessories come in on top of that. What's going to make you feel good about your body? Because training ultimately like makes you feel good.
Yeah.
It releases these endorphins and hormones that make you feel good. So that's kind of like would be my focus, I guess, a little bit more.
I like that you say the purpose of training is to make you feel good because I know so many people in my family, but also in my circle of friends who somebody very close to me said this and I was like dying inside because this person doesn't exercise at all. And I said, hey, why don't you exercise? Like we both know it's good for you. Yeah, I don't do that because it's too stressful. And I was like, but that's the point. Like the stress is ideally hormetic stress that you
Yeah.
adapt to. And I found that so profound. But I think maybe it's just that a lot of people, when they try to exercise, do too much. They go too far. Instead of pursuing sort of the feel good feeling from exercise, they maybe have a sense of like, if it's not too hard, if I'm not dead afterwards, then it doesn't count, right? You're a sports scientist. So I want to ask you just straight up and directly, as we talk about how people can be more fit, is how does one dial in like the right level where they still feel good and they enjoy the challenge, but it's also producing just enough hormetic stress that they can actually adapt and grow instead of like, I can also feel good going to the gym and like watching Netflix on the treadmill at like 1 kph, right? And that's not going to stress me enough. So like, how do we, I guess, dial in that sweet spot of stress where both it feels good and it has good results?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. I love that. So there's this thing called the RPE scale. 3 letters, the letter R, P, and E. And that stands for the rate of perceived exertion. So that's basically on a scale of 1 to 10. How hard do you believe you're working? 1 being like, I feel like nothing at all. 10 being like, I'm about to die. 1 rep max. Like, I can't anymore. You're at failure. So along this scale, this determines how intense your training should be, basically depending on your goals also at the time. So let's say, for example, a lot of people are training for hypertrophy or even like losing weight. I mean, cardio is more, we work more with heart rates, but we can also use RPE for that too. So let's say you want to like firstly, to stick with hypertrophy. I want to put on like more muscle. I want to get bigger. I want a bigger bum, whatever. I want my arms to be bigger, my chest to be bigger.
I want my arms to be bigger.
Yes. So for hypertrophy,
Yeah.
if that's your goal, usually you're going to be working within a repetition range of between 8 to 12 repetitions. That's usually going to be your repetition range.
Meaning you said 8 to 12?
8 to 12.
Meaning
usually.
you can't do 13. Like it's physically, so 13 would be RPE 10.
No, so basically that's how many repetitions you're going to do.
Okay.
Right? So we're going to get to the RPE now in a second.
Okay.
So that's how many repetitions you're going to do between 8 to 12 repetitions. And in those repetitions, you want to work at an RPE of around maybe 6 or 7. If you're at an RPE 8 or 9, you shouldn't be able to do 12 reps, basically, because now you're at failure.
Right.
There's a thing when it comes to muscle adaptation. If hypertrophy is our goal, a lot of the time we don't actually want to reach failure unless we're on our last set or something, which is okay. But during the actual work, if you reach failure too early, now your muscle's too stressed for you to get enough out of it for the next set.
So then you automatically fail on every set that comes.
Exactly. So there's a lot of people who will like, let me train to failure for every single set. It's not ideal for hypertrophy.
Interesting.
For maybe endurance, if that's your goal, is muscular endurance, cool. But it's not many people's goals. Yeah. Not many people are training for muscular endurance. There's a few athletes who actually do like strength endurance, whatever. But that's if your goal is to put on muscle, you shouldn't actually be often in that like failure mode. Actually, that's not where you should be a lot of the time.
So how do you? So it's the RPE. You said 8 or so for.
Let's say around 7.
Okay.
I would go around 7.
But how can we know that? Like, I mean, I think my brother recently got into a lot more fitness. He would ask me if I had this conversation with him, right? He would ask me, but how do you know what RPE 7 feels like?
Yeah, this is the thing. It's individual to everyone, right?
Whoa.
So if you are consistently saying like this feels like a 7 out of 10, then that's what a 7 out of 10 feels like for you. It's hard to know until you've experienced fully a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to judge it based on yourself, because that's why it's called the rate of perceived exertion. So it's what you perceive as a 7 out of 10. So if your perception of this is a 7, let's say your perception of benching 40 kilos is a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
So that means your perception of benching 30 kilos might be a 5 or 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
But that's, now you have a baseline. Now you have a standard, right?
Right.
Because you're like, oh, this feels like a 7. I think I could do a few more repetitions.
Yeah.
There is also a thing, I don't have the scale in front of me right now, but on the scale, it also says 7 out of 10, you have 3 or 4 reps left. 9 out of 10, you're like almost at failure, maybe half a rep left. 8 out of 10, 2 reps left. 7 out of 10, 3 reps left. So that can also give you a guide that if you feel like you could do 3 more repetitions, then you're at a 7 out of 10.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of the scale or range ideally that you should be in.
So then as a coach, if you have this person, like I mentioned, who says, oh, I would exercise, but it's way too stressful, you would say, cool, let's go work out.
Yeah.
And while you're working with them, you would ask them to like in real time, like report their RPE. Like,
Exactly.
okay, so what does this feel like? Does this feel like a 10? Does this feel like, and if they report this feels like a 10, you say, cool, let's bring it down to a 6.
Absolutely.
And then you tell me when it's a 6. And so your goal is to get them to see it as, oh, this thing is actually not too stressful and I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, training should be challenging, but it should not be like killing you at the end of the day, unless you're training for something insane.
Yeah.
But you're training for feeling better, for moving better. You don't need to be in an RPE 10 to move better.
Yeah.
Once you train more consistently, that's when we're talking about, okay, now how do we break the plateaus we're in? That's when it gets a little bit more complicated. We start adding, advanced training systems, stuff that includes failure in different sets, drop sets, for example. We start adding these things to break plateaus.
Yeah.
But that's like way further down the line,
Yeah.
That's not for, hey, I'm like a desk 9-to-5 worker, I just want to exercise. That's like so different.
Yeah. And you're like, let's not spend time getting lost in the details of something that's too complex. Let's just start with the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. Just start where you are, We don't need to look forward. Like, it's like, let's say, for example, you want to like climb a mountain.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be like, oh my God, the peak is there.
Yeah.
Then you're never going to start. Just like look at the hill in front, look at the trail in front of you. Start walking.
That's so good. Yeah, I think what a lot of people do, like I've been also guilty of this, is I say I want to climb a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I'll I'll go out and buy all the gear first.
Yeah.
And then I'll think, okay, I'm going to climb this mountain. And I will literally see the whole mountain, and I'll think, can I do this? Can I not? And I'll then start. I'm a programmer. I think a lot of people listening are. We'll start like analyzing the paths. Okay, so if I adjust the angle of my foot like by 3 degrees, I can go this much further. And we'll be like numbers people.
Yeah.
And like a big problem I have is I get so deep in the numbers and the protocols that I just don't do anything.
Yeah.
And so I love your approach of like, let's just take one step first, and we'll see. Awesome. We talked a lot about what happens to the body when you exercise. When you do like weight training as a minor, you may have stunted growth, and when you do calisthenics, you grow, and so on. And I think it's more or less quite well understood what happens to the body when we exercise. It adapts if it's hormetic.
Yeah.
Hormetic meaning adaptable stress. Let's talk about what happens to the body when the opposite happens, meaning when we sit for extended periods of time, like the entire day.
Yeah.
And again, hey, there's so many people who, I was walking around the other day with my wife, and I said to her, isn't it odd how so many, because we were just watching people pass on the street.
Yeah.
And maybe they work out, maybe they don't. I judged books by their covers, and I just thought they didn't work out because they didn't look like it. I'm sorry. But in any case, I asked her a question. I was like, isn't it so interesting how there's so many people here walking around, and there's so many people in the world who are just like content being sedentary, who are just content with like average health, and who aren't trying to like squeeze every bit out of performance of this body they've been given, And she looked at me and she said, no, I think that's just a you issue. That's what she said. She's like, no, she's like, normal people don't go around thinking about all the ways to optimize their health. But regardless, I did ask her why that happens. And now I want to ask you, like, when people sit for all these hours, what happens to them?
Okay, that's a really cool question. Again, super relevant as well. So what happens to a sedentary, am I saying that right? I always struggle with that word.
Sedentary?
Yeah, sedentary. I never pronounce it right, I know how it's written.
Yeah.
But a person who's basically not really exercising in their day-to-day. So there's a few things that happen to your body when you're sitting at a desk first day. First thing that I think happens, and it's quite common for people, is they start to lose posture. So the shoulders start to round forward. So our body does this thing after time. It will move. Your body will naturally move to the position that it's most comfortable in. And for a lot of people, that will be your shoulders will round forward. The reason being that the muscles that stabilize your scapula, so basically...
Scapula being shoulder blades.
Yes, exactly. So thank you. The muscles that stabilize your shoulder blades are basically all around your back. You have your lower traps, you have your rotator cuff muscles, all of these muscles, they are not strong enough to keep your chest upright because they haven't been trained. So instead of this position with good posture being comfortable and the position that your body resorts to because the muscles are strong and stable, your shoulders will start to round forward. This leads to us having poor posture.
Hunchback.
Exactly. And that's what's happening in your upper body. Now we come to our lower body. You're in this position where your hips are flexed. When I say flex, so it basically means extended would be you're standing upright, you're standing tall. Flex means your knees are basically bent. So we're in this position now where our hips are constantly flexed. And because we're sitting in this position, what happens to the muscles here around your hip flexors, around your hips, is that they are in a shortened position for a long time, but they start to maintain this shortened position. So that's why we might feel like really, my hips feel really stiff, they feel really tight, because your hip flexors are now shortened. So instead of them being in their healthy, elongated, like natural position, they're now shortened, and basically pulling down also on your glutes as well. So it doesn't feel good.
And you're saying the muscles, they change, they become
shorter. Yeah.
Wow, crazy.
They become shorter. Well, because our muscles can like lengthen and shorten, basically. That's the property of muscle.
That's crazy because this is one of the few times I hear this, right? What we hear more often from YouTube and like influencer channels is muscles grow and shrink. You get big biceps, you get small biceps.
Yeah.
But the fact that they get longer and shorter, this is okay. So more sitting means your hip flexors become shorter chronically.
Yes, it's the same thing when we train, right? Really cool. Oh, this was so cool. I learned this like recently as well. So let's say, for example, I'm doing a bicep curl.
Yeah.
A lot. You see sometimes in the gym, guys walking around with their arms like this,
Yeah.
like their elbow is not fully straight.
Yeah.
The reason for that is because they've done so many bicep curls to like half range of motion that now the bicep tendon has actually become shortened
Whoa.
and used to that range of motion because they're not going through the full range. So now when they're relaxed, they're in that half range of motion in the relaxed state because that's the range of motion they train through. It's the same way we're sitting with our hips flexed like this. So now when we're relaxed, our hip flexors are shortened.
Interesting. So then if the opposite is true, so for example, these bicep guys,
Yeah.
if they keep their arms in an extended position for a long portion of the day, will they get that mobility back? Or
No. So now we need to talk about what mobility is.
okay.
Right? So to understand how they fix the problem, you also need to understand, well, what is actually mobility?
Yes.
Because a lot of the time we're like, you're saying you're just gonna keep the arm there, basically.
Exactly.
So
Keep it straight and then it lengthens.
They're just gonna stretch it, basically.
Yeah.
But that's not what mobility is. Mobility and stretching are two different things.
Okay, but before we get to mobility, would stretching fix the problem?
Stretching on its own, no.
Interesting. Because it's the lack of stretching that got them there in the first place. It shortened the muscle.
Yes, exactly. So stretching, I'm saying yes and no.
Okay.
What's they say in
Jein.
German? Jein.
Yeah.
Jein. Because you're stretching, cool, but then the muscle is still going to be weak, which is not beneficial for you. So that's why I'm saying jein. What you would want to do is you would want to go through the full range of motion and put it under load and control. So mobility is what we call stretch. It's almost like stretching, but it's not exactly stretching. It's going through a full range of motion with control and stability. So now what I'm doing is I would add a load. A lot of the time to add stability, you add a load, so it makes it unstable. So you're now going through that full range of motion, nice and controlled with a load.
And nice and controlled means no shaking, no
exactly.
jittery.
It means taking your time. You're not
Right.
nice and controlled. Same thing with our hips. We're not just going to stretch it. We're going to go through the full range of motion, under control, preferably with a load or something that adds stability.
So would you say this is almost like a prerequisite to heavy load weightlifting, hypertrophy, strength style training, where unless you can do a mobility version of a movement, then you have no business doing a hypertrophy or strength version of this movement. You know what I mean? Like with a bicep curl, if I can't lift a bicep a dumbbell, like a 2 kilogram dumbbell, if I can't lift a 2 kilogram dumbbell slow and controlled, mobility style, then I have no business trying this rapidly with like a 8-10 kilogram dumbbell.
I don't think that's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Because in terms of like resistance training,
Yeah.
Not everything you're going to do is tempo, because we have tempo training,
Right.
which is where you do things like with a slow concentric and a slow eccentric. That's tempo training. It's another variable of making your training harder.
Interesting.
So like in hypertrophy training, you can either increase the weight, increase the reps, or you can slow down the tempo of what you're doing. It's another like variable that we can change.
So you could do mobility style training for hypertrophy.
Yeah, mobility style training. So mobility is a training of its own.
Okay.
And hypertrophy is a training of its own.
Okay.
Just want to like clear that up. The reason I was using the bicep curls, not because that's a mobility training, it's just because it's an exercise that they've done not through the full range of motion. So what it's done, it's shortened the muscle. So ideally, we want to train through full ranges of motion so that we can function fully as humans. And people have this belief that if I go through the full range of motion, well, I'm going to be weaker at the end point. So they go like halfway. It's easier.
Right.
But that's also not true, because if you train through the full range of motion, you're going to get stronger through the full range of motion. And then the full bicep is going to be strong instead of just half of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. You did. Yeah, it was about what happens to, the OG question, right? What happens to us when we sit a lot? So you mentioned the shoulder, we get a hunchback.
Yes.
And I see this so often, especially unfortunately on airplanes, like traveling.
Yeah, it happens.
Oh my gosh. Like it's people literally, like they become C-shaped, literally shaped like a C, because they're like over a laptop like this.
the hunchback, and then you mentioned the hip flexors. They shorten the muscles, actually shorten,
exactly.
and then mobility is what can. But I didn't mean to cut you short. You said
No,
the
absolutely.
shoulders, the hip flexors. What else happens? Is there anything else? That,
Yeah, those were like the two main ones that I was thinking of when it
Crazy.
comes to your body.
Okay, and so those were the problems. And to solve it, you mentioned we do some stretching, we do some mobility.
Yeah. So for example, for the hunchback, what I would go with then is strength training. So
Right.
now the problem is that my back muscles are weak.
Yeah.
So I'm going to strengthen them up.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do, you can do exercise like face pulls.
Yeah.
It's an exercise. It's quite good for working your trapezius muscles, especially.
Mm-hmm.
You can do something like seated rows. Same thing. Also good for working those muscles here that stabilize your scapula.
Yeah.
Um,
So anything that pulls backwards,
Yeah,
to
amazing.
bring you back up.
yes, exactly.
Interesting.
So we have your I can get into the names, but I don't think it's really useful.
What is it? Serratus.
You have your serratus
I
anterior.
knew it. Yeah.
You have your rotator cuff, so your supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor,
Awesome.
subscapularis, but that's like a deeper muscle.
Yeah.
You have your trapezius muscle. You have your rhomboids.
Okay.
So your traps, you have like upper traps, mid. Some people like to split into upper traps, mid trap, lower trap. Unimportant.
Okay.
Your back muscles.
Yeah. We talked about muscles.
Yes.
What happens to the spine if somebody's like sitting for? You mentioned when we talked about children working out, calisthenics, all of this.
Yes.
You mentioned it's good for the spine, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about the opposite case there, where you're sitting 8, 9, 12, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
What's the effect on the spine? Is there one? Is it like some vertebra gets pinched? You get like sciatica or something like this? What?
Yes. See, that can happen. These are all things that can happen because you're in this position where you're hunched over, and none of your muscles are actually like working, basically. So instead of you having this nice, I was gonna say upright spine because your spine is not straight; it is curved.
You mean
anyways.
neutral spine?
Yeah, neutral. Thank you so much. Basically, instead of maintaining that neutral spine, then your spine is gonna start like becoming curved.
Oh my goodness!
As
So this
far as I
changes
know,
at the bone level.
it can.
My
I believe so. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm not 1,000% sure. Of
course.
So I don't want to feed you some false propaganda now.
Yeah, that's good.
So I'm gonna tell you straight up.
Yeah.
In theory, it makes sense to me.
Wild. Okay, so we talked about muscles, spine. Does it affect the cardiovascular system at all? And I ask this because as a coach, you obviously teach people cardio.
Yeah.
You football, you need cardio a lot.
Yeah.
If you sit all day, what implications does it have for your cardiovascular system?
Honestly, I would say it depends on what you do after. It depends on what you do before or after. Because we're not expected to like run all day or walk all day.
Yeah.
That's not the expectation. The World Health Organization's guidelines for standard health is 30 minutes of moderate exercise. This can be walking is considered moderate exercise 5 times a day or 5 times a week. Sorry.
5 times a week. Okay.
Yeah. So a total of 150 minutes of walking is considered enough exercise by the World Health Organization. Whether I agree with that or not is, let's see.
Yeah, okay. But you would say that's the bare minimum.
That's the baseline bare minimum that we can build on. But in terms of sitting all day affecting your cardiovascular health, it depends on how much time you have. Because your cardiovascular health basically is improved by how you move. So if you're sitting for 8 hours, you're not moving. So your heart's not getting any healthier, basically. It's not doing work. It's not training, it's not getting stronger. It's not learning how to be more efficient in pumping blood around your body.
In fact, is the opposite true? Is it getting less efficient at pumping blood around your body because you're not stressing it? You're not giving it a reason to like grow its capability. Let me ask it another way. When you do cardio exercise, your heart gets stronger. Your stroke volume grows up.
Yes,
meaning
absolutely.
the amount of blood it moves per stroke.
Yeah.
And by stroke, I don't mean a stroke. I mean per pump.
Yeah.
But when you challenge it, it gets better. When you don't challenge it, does it stay the same or does it get worse? I would guess it gets worse because with age you decline, right?
Yeah. I mean, it gets worse because in exercise we have this thing called the reversibility effect. So the reversibility effect means if you train for a certain period of time, you're going to see an adaptation. So you'll get stronger. If you train your heart will also get stronger. So you'll feel fitter. Instead of me running my 5K at 30 minutes, I'm going to now be able to run at 25 minutes because my heart's more efficient, for example. So now, let's say I don't exercise for the next 2 months.
Yeah.
And I go back to run my 5K. I'm like, oh, why am I running my 5K at 30 minutes again?
Yeah.
Because of the reversibility effect now. Now your resting heart rate had lowered, and now it's gone back up again.
Interesting.
What I don't know is if sitting down at a desk is going to make your heart rate worse over time because your heart rate hasn't gotten better at any point.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to reverse. It's kind of at ground base of not so good.
Yeah. Except if you age, then things go like after age 30.
As you age, your heart rate slowly.
Right. And if you continue maybe eating in an unhealthy way, you accumulate like fatty deposits,
cholesterol,
plaque, and exactly. Okay, so it's not positive. Put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's everything you do outside of your 9-to-5 desk job. So I don't want to condemn anyone working a 9-to-5 desk job or think because of my 9-to-5 desk job, my heart is not like powerful or strong, or because of my 9-to-5 desk job, I'm having these issues with exercise. Like your 9-to-5 desk job, of course, it's not ideal, but there are absolutely ways around all of these things.
Yeah.
And it's making things harder, but it doesn't limit you. So it doesn't limit you being able to run a 5K in 20 minutes. Just be consistent. It doesn't limit you being able to lift 70 kilos in the gym. Just be consistent.
Awesome.
So everything's about consistency.
So the takeaway is really do anything, but do it consistently. And if you can't do it in your 9-to-5 day, then you can do something before, you can do something after.
Yeah.
Just keep it consistent.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. That's good to know. Is there a threshold? Meaning, sitting like 8 hours a day is maybe very bad for your spine, for your hip flexors and all this. But if you reduce it to 4 hours a day, it's less bad. If you have 12 hours a day, it's too bad. Is there, I guess another way of asking it, is there a threshold after which the damage becomes a lot? And if you stay under it, then you can avoid a lot of these issues with the spinal deformation and the hip flexors and so on.
In terms of like how many hours you're sitting, you mean?
Yeah. Like if you're sitting more than this hours, that's when you start to develop a hunchback.
Yeah. Honestly, I haven't done the research on it, or I haven't read the articles on it, so I don't know. But based on like my understanding of the human anatomy and how our body works is that, let's say, for example, you're sitting at a desk 4 hours a day. And what are you doing after those 4 hours? That's kind of where my question would come in. So it's not, I don't even think the focus should be on how much you're sitting at a desk, but actually what you're doing after you sit at the desk. You could sit at 12 hours at the desk, cool. But after that 12 hours, you're like some like crazy athlete who's doing all of this and all of that, taking care of their body, doing mobility training. You go to bed. Before you go to bed, you're like, I'm doing this stretching, boom, 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 boom. Then it doesn't matter that you're at the desk 12 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm also kind of speaking a little bit from experience because when I was in school, and because also as a football player, it's so important to stretch and do your mobility because again, you're in these, when you sprint, your hips are flexed. So you're constantly in these positions where your hip flexors are under stress. So it's important to stretch them and to take care of them. And this is a common problem with football players is that we don't do this. A lot of us are just like, I don't know, we just say like, oh, it's not important, but it is. It's extremely important. So at a young age, I also didn't do this. I wasn't stretching very much. And I was in school, so I sat down a lot. And I also developed this problem where I was arching forward with my posture was terrible, but it wasn't just when I was sitting down. When I was standing up, my posture was also bad. The doctors pointed out, hey man, your posture is really bad. So I actively had to improve my posture. And this is like, for me, just sitting during school.
Yeah.
But because I wasn't like doing the things around it that I needed to do, I was having these issues where my hips were tight when I was in football training. I was like, oh, wow, I don't feel like I can run as fast as I'm able to run usually. But because I wasn't doing the other things around. And I was not sitting down at 12 hours a day in school, So again, it's not the amount of time you're sitting at the desk that counts, but it's, hey, what am I doing when I'm not sitting at the desk?
So good. So good. When someone told you like, hey, you have bad posture, what was the solution? Like, how did and I'm asking because now people know like all this stuff can happen to you if you're sitting too much and not doing enough around it to offset that.
Yeah.
So how did you fix your posture and how can listeners fix their postures now that they're awakened to this?
Yeah. For me, I think it was really interesting because the doctor doctors, I don't know. My doctor did not like really give me great advice, but it somehow worked because I would give different advice now. But my doctor was kind of like, just keep your chest up. When you notice your posture is slouching, like bring your chest up. So I was a child. When someone told me to do something, I was like, boom. It was the same with all my football coaches. They told me to do something, boom. It just, there was a switch in my head that flicked and boom, relax. No, teacher's pet is crazy. But no, so literally I was walking around and every time I'd notice, I'd be like, oh my God, I need to go up. I need to go up. I need to go up. Harder to do now as an adult for sure, because it's not something we're programmed. Okay, chest up, chest up, chest up. So now what I would do is I would honestly prescribe, as a coach, is what I would do. I'd prescribe strength exercises that are going to strengthen the muscles to keep your chest up.
Oh, because you said our muscles go where they want to at rest, like where they're most comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. So my muscles were not actually that weak, but I was just in this habit of doing this.
I see.
So me bringing my chest up was not an issue. I could maintain this position. So what I would do is I would tell you guys to, hey, think about keeping your chest up, but also let's work on, like, with the exercises that I told you earlier.
Yes.
Face pulls, seated rows. Those are like 2 examples.
Okay. That's good. My friend JB, I sent him a video of me doing, man, what's it called? It's called a clean. You know the CrossFit one where you do a hang clean?
Yeah.
And then you over the head with a split stance?
Yeah, split and jerk.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that recently.
Really?
Yeah. And I sent my friend JB a video of me doing this.
Oh, you sent me a video. I want to see.
Oh, I would. I'm ashamed of it.
I want to see this now, man. That's so technical.
Yeah. It was hard. And it's challenging because obviously you've got to lock out your elbows over your head, but my arms don't extend all the way, so form is questionable. But I sent it to JB, and he was like, man, teach me how to do this.
No way.
But he also said, because I wanted to fix my posture. So can that fix posture, or is it more the pulling, like the face pulls and things like that?
Yeah, I would say for fixing permanent posture, maybe more in the direction of like face pulls, because you're actually just working on those muscles. But the final position of a split and jerk, you need a lot of shoulder stability. You need a lot of like scapular stability, shoulder stability in that position.
Yeah.
So doing exercises that are going to work on those stabilizers, you would honestly want to do before doing the split and jerk.
I see.
Because you're going to get to the top of the split and jerk and then be like, I can't hold this position, which is a little bit problematic then.
Yeah. That was me. I was like, this is too hard. I've heard the phrase, you can't outrun a bad diet, right? A lot of people like will eat a lot and then not lose weight, and it's, you can't outrun a bad diet. Can you comment on this phrase? You can't out exercise excessive sitting. Does that apply?
Ooh, you can't out exercise excessive sitting. That's a good one. Ooh, I gotta think about that. I don't know if I 100% agree with that statement.
Because you can out exercise. Like if you sit a lot.
Yeah.
You said multiple times. It's the things you do around it.
Exactly. Yeah. The reason I'm thinking so much, I'm like, well, if you are sitting for 17 hours in a day, how many hours are you actually gonna have to exercise? Because you gotta sleep sometime. Yeah. But in theory, yes, you can out exercise a excessive sitting.
Good. I wanted to ask you, what are the warning signs somebody's body is? I mean, we obviously talked about the hip flexors and so on like this. But there's a difference between I casually have bad posture. I'm C-shaped, but it's fine. Like it's not hurting me. But then there's a stage where, okay, this is actually like really bad. And I even maybe have a shortened lifespan because of it. So have you, like, is there a time where people need to maybe pay way more attention to their bad posture than others?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It getting to the point where it's affecting your lifespan is never good.
Yeah.
But in general, I think there's a thing we do where our posture and our hips and all these things, it's actually affecting our life quality and the things that we do in our life in general. But we're like, it's okay. I don't need to do that. Yeah. It's fine. I don't need to do that. It's okay. I think that's already a warning sign, to be honest with you. Before it gets to the point where, okay, this is actually like life threatening. I think that's already a warning sign when you notice you're starting to make decisions around it. Like, I'm not actually going to go for that walk today. I'm not actually going to go play with my kid because I feel a little tight in my hips or stiffness. That's all for me. That's already like a warning flag. Like, what do you mean you're not going to play with your kid? Man, go play with your kid.
Yeah, where it starts to inhibit the quality of your life.
Absolutely. I think that's already like for me a warning flag, because we want to already prevent it from getting worse. And we want to make it better.
Yeah.
And we want to. The reason we've been given these bodies is like it's really a blessing and a gift from God.
Yeah.
So not being able to actually use it for what it's been made to use is really a shame.
Yeah.
Not something to be ashamed of, but it's a shame. It's because it's sad.
Yeah, it's like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you make a phone, but it can't make phone calls.
Yeah. And man, this is a thing. And I just realized this is quite cool because, a lot of the time we're like, oh, I want to have my kids when I'm quite young.
Yeah.
Like I want to be a young dad, so I'm like fit and able to move. Well, how about being an old dad that's fit and able to move?
Come on.
That would be so cool, right?
Yes. Yeah, I actually care a lot about this because there was a really old person in my family who recently died.
I'm sorry.
But he, towards the end of his life, it was just difficult to be around him because he was standing and stuff, but you never knew when he was going to fall. And so everybody was kind of on edge. Oh, is he going to fall? Is he going to fall?
Yeah.
Because he grew to an age where he no longer had that stability. And a lot of people say, like I've heard a lot of smokers say, oh, if I die young, it's fun. I don't know that that's true. But also, I think it's kind of a bad idea that when you get old, it automatically means you're not fit, right?
Yeah,
I would
for
love to
sure.
be like an 80-year-old or 70-year-old who can still do like push-ups, pull-ups,
Yeah, for
squats.
sure.
And that's kind of the purpose of why we're talking about. Because I feel like when you sit at a desk all day, you rob yourself of maybe those strength gains later in life. That's going to come in handy, right? Speaking of, you said the World Health Organization has this recommendation of like 150 minutes a week of exercise, of light exercise, moderate exercise.
Moderate exercise, yes.
For desk workers, there's a lot of innovation these days around like under desk ellipticals or like cycling pedals or walking pads. Is there merit to that? Like, can those reasonably move the needle on fitness, or is it just a gimmick?
That's a good question. Because I haven't seen them. The ones that I know of are like the standing desks, or like the people have these like treadmills where they like work. I think you have one also in like your house as well.
Yeah.
As far as I know, if I'm like thinking about it, okay, how do these things work? If it's burning calories, it's great. And also if it's bringing your heart rate up, then also great. Because this is really the kind of the focus of exercise, is working your heart. So if what you're doing, I'm moving my feet all day, because you're also moving your hands and fingers all day.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're moving your feet all day and it's not actually affecting your heart rate in any way, your heart rate's not going up, you don't have to, what's it called? Your heart doesn't have to produce more beats per minute.
Yeah.
Then your heart's not actually working and you're just wasting money, unfortunately. That's the harsh reality.
So it's really about creating an environment, creating an
stimulus,
in your body that is, like you said, RPE. We talk about RPE. That's RPE, because maybe these under desk things are like RPE 1, which that's not going to do much.
No.
And so what you're saying is it's really around RPE 6 or 7 where we start to see, okay, this is meaningful.
No, I did not say that.
Okay,
I did not say that. Because there are different RPE. The RPE scale is long for a reason, So depending on what your goals are, let's say, for example, your goal is fat loss.
Yeah.
So you would not want to be in an RPE 7 for fat loss, actually.
Okay.
Because now your heart is in a much higher heart rate zone. So we have these things called heart rate zones. So they're target zones they will want to put our heart rate in.
Yeah.
In order to, let's say, produce the adaptation that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So let's say your adaptation is fat loss. So for fat loss, you actually want to be like way lower on the RPE scale, around maybe an RPE 3 or an RPE 4 max. So this is what we call also in terms of cardio, we'd call that zone 2 cardio. So that's basically when your heart rate, I believe, is around 60% of your maximum heart rate. So for me, my maximum heart rate, there's a calculation everyone does. It's you do the numbers 220 minus your age. I'm 24. So my heart rate in theory should be around 196.
Okay.
Right?
So that was really quick math, man.
Yeah, bro. I was like looking, I was like, what's the number? So my heart rate should be around 196, my maximum heart rate in theory. So if I want to work for fat loss, I'm going to go around 60% of 196. Okay, let's see if I can do that.
Come on.
Oh, man.
A little over half, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even, right now my brain is like drawn a blank. I haven't even tried yet.
We can do half of 196 is 98. 98. So a little 60% is like, I don't know, like 110, 116.
Yeah, sure.
They called me an engineer, bro. I can't do math.
Bro, I didn't even try. I honestly didn't even put the numbers in my head. I was like, you know what, it's fine.
Yeah.
So let's say like 115. Let's just go even number. 115.
Yeah.
That would be for me zone 2, and probably around an RPE 3 also, which means again the number will say like it feels like a 3 out of 10. And that, for example, will bring the stimulus that you're looking for of fat loss. RPE 1, you will not feel anything at all. So again, you're doing this, you're not bothered at all. But an RPE 3, I can still speak to you. I can still talk to you, but I'm burning fat now. My body is using my fat stores to basically fuel what I'm doing. It's quite cool. And now when we increase the RPE, now I'm switching energy system. My body's using carbohydrates and carbs, and that's kind of not what we're looking for right now.
Yeah, you're trying to burn fat.
Exactly.
So you keep the energy low. And do I understand correctly that if you drop carbohydrates from your diet, then you burn fat more?
Ooh, keto diet.
Yeah.
Keto diet is an interesting one.
I figured I'd ask since we're already here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Keto diet I don't like it. As a footballer, I hate it.
Yeah.
Because glycogen or glucose, carbohydrates are the energy system for the body, basically. So when you dropped that, it's kind of like, you don't even really have energy anymore. Your muscles are losing glycogen. And it's really interesting because carbohydrates and protein work together for protein synthesis. So like the consumption of carbohydrates and proteins together also helps you actually fuel muscle growth. So that's why I dislike when people remove carbohydrates from their diet, but that's like a personal preference.
Yeah.
Keto diet's a bit funky. It's a bit of a funky one. There's so much like research around it, and there's still more coming out as far as I know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it was originally created as a treatment for epilepsy. Did you know this? So the guy was treating epilepsy in children to prevent seizures, and he found that if he removes carbohydrate and induces ketosis, seizures go away. And as a consequence, these kids lost a lot of fat. So what did capitalist America do? They were like, we can sell fat loss wonder propaganda for a diet targeted towards epilepsy treatment.
Yeah.
But its roots are in like preventing seizures.
Okay, I see.
And so yeah, but I actually eat everything. But depending on the season, we'll moderate like less carbs or more carbs. But I think all out carb reduction keto also is just super difficult. Like it makes me more stressed out usually.
Yeah.
And so I'm not so into that. Let's talk about training. Because a lot of people now I feel like are inspired. I mean, you're this guy with this understanding of the human body using terms like serratus anterior and all of this. So if somebody is now feeling motivated to, I'm gonna fix this. The recipe is cardio to grow the heart and lungs, the cardiovascular capacity, and some type of strength training, either calisthenics with body weight, or like resistance training with the gym.
Yes.
Plus some type of like strength and mobility. Stretching and mobility type protocol.
Yes.
Do I understand? Those are like the 3 ingredients of general fitness.
Of general fitness, no. Of a training program, yes.
Okay. So I wonder if we can like start to tease out a little bit a training program, like create one in real time for the average software engineer who's like sitting and working on a desk the whole day.
Sure.
So these would be components in that program.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Excellent. Is it possible to do the resistance training or get fit? Let's just zoom out. Is it possible to get fit with zero equipment at home?
Yes, 100%.
Really?
Yeah, bro, of course. It's maybe will feel harder because machines kind of make things easier. It's easier to adjust your level machines. Um, but when you're doing things at home, you're kind of doing everything is more functional. So that means your core is usually involved in everything. So it'll feel harder, but you can get in great shape at home.
Wow.
Like phenomenal shape, actually.
Without any dumbbells at home?
Yeah, without any equipment.
Crazy.
What would be hard is, and this is always a struggle, is without any equipment whatsoever, doing back exercises, because you can't do like an upside down push up. You need like a bar or something, or like some sort of band. But in general, with like minimal equipment, 100%.
Interesting. Okay, let's pull on it. Let's design this protocol. I'm really interested now.
Sure.
Let's add layers of complexity to this. Firstly, I'm just an engineer. I'm sitting on my desk. I'm working. But also, I'm traveling now. I'm in a hotel.
Yeah.
Where there's no gym, which those exist in Europe, and I hate it. Like most hotels in the US have gyms, you know.
Yeah.
But in Europe, it's anyway. So these are our constraints. Okay. What do we do? So let me take a stab. Let me take a guess, and I want you to correct me and humble me. Okay. So
Okay. I think you'd be surprised. You know a lot more than you.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
So what you would do is, for the cardio, I mean, nature is great. Just go run outside.
Yeah.
There was actually a really awesome quote by someone, I can't remember the name. They said, "Nature reveals itself to those who choose to discover it on foot." I love. Yeah,
that's really good.
I love it. And it's so great for running outside. You know, so I think cardio, you can run either outside or even in place, just like at home, just like jog on the spot.
Yeah.
You can skip rope if you have a rope. Literally, you don't even need a lot of space. You can do
Jumping
it at home.
jacks.
Jumping jacks, Heisman, 1, 2, 3 Heisman, mummy kicks.
Yeah, there's so many different variations of cardio you can do. Like really.
Do burpees count as cardio?
Burpees count as cardio, yes.
So there you go. So that's sorted. Cardio, I think, is sorted.
That's more high intensity cardio. So again, depends on your goals.
Right. And if you want lower intensity cardio, you could skip. I think skip rope is pretty. You can get into zone 2. Not double unders, but like single.
Yeah. Again, depends on your fitness level. Could also be considered high intensity.
I mean, for some people, just walking
intense.
is high intensity. Yeah. Okay. That's cardio. For the resistance piece, you want to do maybe some squats, air squats.
Squats are good.
Push-ups.
Push-ups are good.
And the back exercise is super hard, right? Like you probably can't do pull-ups anywhere. You need a pull-up bar.
You need to get a pull-up bar.
I have an idea. And I've done this actually on my travels, which is towel door rows. So or just door rows. So like a door frame.
Yeah.
You hold on the door frame and go back. So it's like an incline row.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
On a door frame. That's what I've done at hotels, but I would just start with those 3, do them consistently, and then see what happens. So now you can rate my protocol, and maybe we can design a better one.
Okay. So with our squats, what muscles are we working? That's the first thing I'll ask you, because we want to balance everything, right?
That's good.
So with our squats, what muscles are working? This is how my brain thinks when I'm thinking of programming. So with our squats, depending on how we're squatting, let's say we're working our glutes, hamstrings, also our quads as well. Those are like the main muscles.
Calves.
Calves as well, yeah.
Core. Air squats.
Yes.
There was spinal erectors.
Yeah. Okay. In our push-ups, what muscles are we working?
Chest, triceps, shoulders, front delts.
Front delt, shoulders, same thing.
Yeah.
Rose is like whipping out the terms. He's like, I know what deltoids are.
Yeah. Well, because shoulders,
also engaged.
side delts, and back delts.
For everything we're gonna do, everything's gonna have core involved.
Okay.
And for your towel rows
or door rows.
Towel door rows.
Yeah. So for the towel door rows, we've got the middle back. What's the muscle called?
We've got your rhomboids, kind of.
That's
your
right.
trapezius.
And
your
lats,
biceps.
Maybe.
Lats a little bit. Just stabilize. You've got your biceps.
Yeah.
So all in all, pretty well rounded, pretty balanced. Trying to think what else I would add.
I guess it's just the plane of motion is not really that, like it's vertical.
Very linear.
Yeah, exactly. So what I was taught, I love talking to people smarter than me, because like I was taught things that I don't know if are holistic enough. What I was taught is you want to mix multiple planes of motion,
absolutely.
right? So instead of a squat just going up, you also want like a horizontal leg press or something like this. So is that maybe we should add some more planes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have different planes. You have like your frontal plane, you have your sagittal plane, you have your longitudinal plane, transverse plane. The planes always messed me up in uni, man. I was like, why is this transverse plane? Why is this like frontal plane? But I just know that they go through different planes of movement. That's like where my brain works.
Right.
So for example, now we've done a squat. What we can add in our two options, two alternatives. We can go with a forward lunge. So a lunge moving forward. So now we are working our quads, but we're also working on our knee stability because we're lunging forward.
Yeah.
And your knee has to stabilize in that bottom lunge position and push yourself back up. If that is difficult for someone, let's say they have knee pain, I would swap to a reverse lunge because now it's working a little bit more my glutes, but it also works my quads and it puts a little less strain on my knee. So now we have a different movement, but also now 2 leg exercises. A forward lunge now, a bit more focus on my quads. And with my squats, I'll sit a bit back more to have a bit more focus on my glutes. For your strength, for your upper body exercises, we have a push-up, which is a great exercise. Working through one plane. You can also now, let's switch it up. I want to have bigger arms, but let's do a bench dip. So now you're on the edge of a bench. You're going to go for dips. Super accessible. You can do it on a chair even. Really, really easy, really simple. And you can go for a lot of reps if you want. Now for my pull exercise, I'm like, okay, I'm doing a row. What else can I do? Without equipment, it's a little bit tough, like really.
Yeah.
But I would maybe invest in a band, honestly, because it's gonna like just change your whole training. Like just a long band.
Oh, I see. And you put it between your feet and then pull towards you?
Yeah, with a long band, you can sit down on the floor with your feet out in front of you, seated upwards, have the band on your feet, pulling towards your chest. You have a seated row.
Yeah.
With a long band, you can stand up.
Deadlift.
Curl.
Oh, okay.
You can do a curl. Deadlift I don't know if you'll get the same, it will work a little bit. I don't know if you get the same stimulus as you would with a normal deadlift. But again, these are just options for when you're at home in the office. And these things are working all the muscles that we need them to work.
So cool.
So you're not missing out on anything. And if you're feeling like funky, let me do some ab exercises after. I want to like build my 6-pack. Key point to notice is that if you want your abs to show, it's about losing belly fat, really, and stomach fat.
Abs are made in the kitchen.
They are. This is true. It's a fact.
Yeah.
But again, you can do something like, I would actually change it to like core stabilization exercise. Let's do a plank. And people hate the plank, but it's great because it's core stabilization. People hate it because their core is not very stable.
I recently saw a world record where a woman held a plank for like 4 hours.
Yeah, that's scary.
I can't hold a plank for 4 minutes, man. 40 seconds is hard.
Mental endurance is wild.
Yeah.
Really wild.
Incredible. Okay, so we have I think this is great, man. We don't need any equipment. We can just do this at home or as you mentioned just now in the office. Yeah. You could be sitting in the office with your band and like moving.
Yeah. You might sweat. So be ready to shower afterwards because we want to train. But I think what's really important is now you have exercises, but how many repetitions of the exercise do you do? Because that's important.
Yeah.
The frequency of what you're doing when you're training and how you're training, you know?
Yeah. I was taught, you can correct me here. I love being corrected by you. I was taught for strength training or resistance training, either for hypertrophy or strength, what you need is 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week. And so it would be, let's say I do 3 sets a week. Sorry, not 3 sets, 3 times a week, this like body weight thing with push-ups and so on. It would be like 3 to 4 sets of each exercise 3 times a week, which would give me like 12 sets a week, which is within that recommendation. Now, I don't know if this is accurate. Someone told me this in research, but how does that sound?
No, 10 to 20 sets is valid. It's either 10, maybe it starts from 8 sets, but I think 10 to 20 sets is valid. I just had a cool thought that could make this whole workout so cool. Yo. So we could make it a circuit, which would make it really hard. It would make it a lot harder. So maybe not starting off on a circuit. But if you did this workout protocol as a circuit, we talk about cardiovascular exercises being like, oh, let's walk, let's do this, let's do burpees. this whole workout circuit is going to have your heart rate working, your heart working. So it also is working as cardiovascular exercise. And actually, all of the resistance exercises, because of how challenging they are going to actually improve your cardiovascular system. So I kind of want to, destroy the illusion that cardiovascular training and resistance training don't work together, because they actually do work together a lot.
Nice.
So creating this as a circuit would be really, really cool, because it's going to be quite intense. And what that intensity means is that your heart rate is going to increase. So you're going to be at a higher heart rate. So you're not going to be in zone 2 anymore, where you're at 60% of your heart rate. You're going to go quite higher, maybe to like zone 4. You're at 70%, 80% of your maximum heart rate. And while this is not ideal for fat burn, what it is going to do is going to create this thing called an EPOC effect. Don't ask me what the letters stand for. I'm going to tell you what it does.
I know what it stands for.
You do?
Exercise post-oxygen consumption. Yeah. It's where you use more oxygen after your exercise session because you've created an oxygen demand anyway.
Okay. I didn't even know. I remember I read a whole article on this in research. I just didn't know what the letters stood for. I wrote it in my essay in university. I had to make a protocol for someone who was my friend, who was also working all day.
Nice.
Working at the office. Same thing. And this was the protocol I came up with for him. Was a high intensity circuit training, just because he wanted to put on muscle and lose weight. So,
but can you put on muscle with circuit? Because at some point, and this, please dispel this myth if it's a myth.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, I grew up in an environment full of gym bros who are unless you're taking every set to failure, you're not working hard enough. Now go work hard. I grew up in this environment, and so I was told that if you do circuit training with resistance work, you'll get great muscular endurance, but hypertrophy and strength probably won't happen. Now, I think this may not be true, because hypertrophy is also you have to eat. You know, exactly. So maybe if you do this circuit and then eat a lot, sure, you grow in size. But strength, your 1 rep max going up with circuit training, I was told impossible. I'm curious. Please tell me that's wrong, because it sounds awesome because it's so accessible to do a circuit like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, everything comes down to what are your goals.
Right.
Is your goal muscle growth, or is it I want to improve my 1 rep max?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you want to improve your 1 rep max, then training for just strength is the fastest way to make that happen. If you want to just lose weight, then training just for weight loss will be the fastest way to make that happen. But if you want to combine both of them, being hey, I want to lose weight, but I also kind of want to get stronger and put on muscle right now, and I don't have that much time. I don't have time to train for 2 hours. I don't have time to do a cardio session and a strength session. So what am I going to do? I'm going to mix both of them together. So that's where the circuit training comes in. And there's a thing called high intensity circuit training, different than high intensity interval training. It's the HICT. Yes, the HICT. So high intensity circuit training is what this would be ideal for, basically. What it does, it stimulates the EPOC effect. So the EPOC effect for our listeners here is, as you mentioned, excessive
exercise post-oxygen consumption.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what that means is that when you are exercising at a certain intensity now, you're after you've exercised, let's say you've done a really intense session, boom, boom, my heart rate's super high, bah, 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 bah. I'm exhausted. So after exercising, there is a time in which your metabolism is working to burn calories. So you're not training anymore, but your body is still burning calories at rest.
Yeah, some call this the afterburn effect.
Exactly. So that's this afterburn effect is what we are aiming for with our high intensity circuit training. So you're training, you're working hard because you're working in this high heart rate zone now. After you finish training, there is this afterburn effect, and there's this afterburn effect, and this afterburn effect. So almost to the point where after training, you are burning more calories than you are while you are training, essentially. And that's kind of the target and the goal of this. I don't remember how many calories you can burn or the percentage or the numbers. I can't give you the numbers right now because it's been a while since I've read up on this. But this is how it works and operates, basically. Incredible. And if these are your goals, a circuit could be super fun. So turn this into a circuit. You're going to get stronger because you're training consistently. You're going to get stronger. And the way we get stronger is by introducing, what's it called? Progressive overload. We introduce progressive overload, which means that every session, instead of let's say session 1, I did 10 squats. Next week, I'm going to go for 12 squats. The week after that, I'm going to do 15 squats. So we're constantly making the workout slightly harder because we're progressing, we're getting stronger.
Yeah.
If you don't introduce progressive overload, of course, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to notice any differences. And like you said, if you are training consistently and eating consistently, you're going to notice like chain muscle changes. And as you asked earlier, it is not the most efficient way to train for muscular growth or the most efficient way to train for fat loss. Yeah. But if you don't have time to make the most efficient for both, it's combining the best of both worlds.
That's basically. So good. That's really fantastic. I think I don't want it to be lost on people that EPOC for the working professional, the desk worker, is such a game, because you get your EPOC workout in the morning, and then if you're sitting 8 hours after this, you're burning calories while sitting. You're burning calories while sitting. It's so much better than just sitting. True. And probably your hip flexors and your spinal erectors and your scapulae are going to remember the stretch from that, and your posture is probably going to be better throughout the day as well, right? And if you feel, I have this sometimes when I train. So I did a couple of days ago, I did a really heavy back day, and it was really bad. Like, it was also with some deadlifts, and I was sore. My scapula especially was sore the next day. Also my lats, and the soreness reminded me to like get my posture right every now and again. And so I think just the benefits. I think that's honestly the biggest takeaway here. Yeah. Okay, so that's how you do it in your home or in your office. Now let's level up a little bit. Ooh. And assume people have the possibility to go to a gym. What I do in the winter, it's way too cold outside. I prefer to train outside, but nowadays I will just go to FitX and we'll do weights, and then like one day will be some type of weight workout. Another day will be some type of cardio workout. And we just do that 6 days a week. Yeah. Another alternative, which I've never done, is you go to a CrossFit box. Now, you're a CrossFit instructor. We also had Faris on the podcast, who was a CrossFit instructor. Yes. We had him last week. And so these are the alternatives. There's CrossFit, there's traditional. What would you recommend for regular people? And what are the trade-offs between like CrossFit and sort of the traditional approach I outlined earlier?
Yeah, really, really cool. Really good question. I think that honestly, I like after working in a CrossFit box, I think I see that CrossFit is actually man, my English words, I'm missing my English words right now. Spending so much time in Germany. It's accessible. I think CrossFit is accessible for everybody. And I say this because I see the benefits of how it can make people feel, firstly, in terms of confidence, and being able to it's not even about just lifting heavy weights, because there's so many technical movements. You're learning so many different skills. And that's the beauty of CrossFit, is that you learn new skills, actually. And these skills, because every movement is functional, you don't realize how it carries over into your everyday life. Like you spoke earlier about clean and jerk, like holding the top position. That requires shoulder stability, but also hip stability and knee stability, because you're in a split stance. And these are all movements that get strengthened during CrossFit. Yeah. So let's say when you're 70, 80 years old, you're not going to fall because your knees are stable AF and your hips are stable AF. So you're just like chilling. You're like, oh, this is easy. Life is good. Yeah. I think CrossFit is super accessible for everyone. If you want, but one thing I will say is that it is challenging. Yeah. The reason it's challenging is because your core is involved in everything. Every movement is functional, So if you are prepared to be challenged, and I'm not saying challenge as I'm going to be dead, but it's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to sit down on the machine and do some curls.
So what RPE we talking?
At least RPE 5.
Okay.
Absolutely doable. Yeah. But sometimes people go to the gym, they're training at RPE 3. Yeah, because you can. Yeah. You have machines that are built to make things easier for you. That's what machines are there. They're used to make life easier. It's why we built cars. It's why we build machines, to make our lives easier. It's why we built cars. I think, man, I'm getting tired of like riding a horse from here to here. I'm getting tired of walking from here. What can I do? Let me sit in this vehicle now. It's going to get me there. Yeah. That's why we create new innovations to make life easier. And that's why we create new machines to make life easier. So that's kind of like, I guess, the trade-off when a commercial gym is. Things are just they're easier, If you feel like, I don't really want to, like, you can also push yourself hard in a commercial gym. Don't get me wrong, people do. But if that's not your mindset, if you don't have this mindset of I'm always going to push myself hard, and you want to see results, then I would go with a CrossFit box, because the coaches there are going to push you.
Yeah.
That's what they're there for. It's what they're paid to do.
And so, and that's also a big difference, right? Like in a traditional gym, you probably don't have a coach.
No, you're there on your own. But a CrossFit box, at least a lot of them, they offer classes and courses where there's a coach like looking after you and pushing you to get the best out of your results.
How does one get coached by you? Where do people find you?
Yes, currently at Starling Performance. But besides that, I should have a landing page soon.
That's right.
Which you can hit me up on Instagram.
Yeah. Instagram, what's the handle?
Isaac 11890.
11890.
Yeah, there was like an ad I saw when I was a child. I think it was 11890 or an 11850. So that became like my username.
Perfect.
Because those numbers were stuck in my head.
I thought it was your birthday, but that'll make you way too old.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
24, man.
Let's do a rapid fire round. So let's start wrapping up. This is what I want to do. I want to do some rapid fire questions. So you're not allowed to think, just answer.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And the faster you answer, the better, because like it's going to be controversial. And then we can dive a little bit more into your personal story and experience, and then we'll finish. Okay.
Sure.
Rapid fire. I'm going to read these off my list here.
Okay.
Number 1. You ready? Get ready.
Woo! Come on.
Yeah. Best exercise for someone who hates exercise.
Oh, squats.
Squats. Perfect.
I don't know why I said squats.
That's good. Let's go. Morning workouts or evening workouts?
Morning. Safe.
Favorite healthy meal that you eat almost every day?
Yogurt. So it's my breakfast. It's like a yogurt bowl with muesli and almonds and bananas and blueberries. Got a little bit of honey.
Besides yogurt, really?
It's skyr yogurt. It's protein yogurt. Almonds, protein also. So it has like a lot of protein in it. Then you have your carbs, which are muesli and banana and blueberries. Also adding some vitamin C. Oh, so good.
One piece of gym equipment everyone should own.
Oh, it's to own? Yeah. Own pull-up bar? I don't know.
Perfect. Very good. Cardio before or after weights?
Is it a warm-up or actual cardio? Sorry, I'm not supposed
rapid
to
fire. Rapid fire. Come on.
After. It depends on your goals, man. This is such BS question.
Yeah. It's I'll say this. I don't do cardio before weights because then I'm going to be gassed and I'm not going to be able to output much power.
It depends on. It's just we're getting into a thing called concurrent exercise. It depends on your goals.
Whoa. Okay. For the desk worker who doesn't really have goals other than I want to be fitter than I am now.
But you can have goals. Is your goal now? What would you prefer? Would you prefer to lose fat or would you prefer to lose muscle or to put on muscle? Yeah, if your goal is not even muscle related at all, I would go with cardio first.
Yeah.
Not everyone is like, I want to get big muscles. Some people just don't care about that. Yeah. Cardio first.
Okay. Nuanced answer.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's continue with the rapid fire. Where are we? Yeah. Stretching before or after workouts?
Both.
Nice.
Come on.
Your biggest fitness pet peeve?
Oh my God. Leaving equipment lying around and not putting the weights back. That triggers me so much.
I was once in a gym in Sweden. Awesome. Great gym. They had they had weights, obviously, equipment. And they put a sign on the mirror and they said, "Wow, great job lifting the heavy weights. Now show us how strong you are by putting it back."
That's good. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah.
That's fire.
Okay. A fitness myth that needs to die.
If I lift to failure every time, then I'm going to get strong.
Yeah, I hate that one. Good. The best fitness advice you've ever received?
Fitness advice I've ever received? I don't know. What advice have people given me?
Nobody gave you any advice?
No, I've gotten lots of advice, but I need to think about advice.
First one that comes to mind is the best.
That's where I'm thinking. What advice was I given? I would say my strength and conditioning coach. I remember I asked her for a protocol regarding how am I going to improve my VO2 max in terms of football, or how do I get fitter for football? And she recommended for me. She was like, "Hey," I came to her. I said, "Hey, I'm not so good at repeated sprints." I was like, "Should I just train repeated sprints? Should I do like 5K? Should I do like longer runs?" And she's like, "Hey, the best thing for you to do is to combine both of them. So don't just do repeated sprints, but also do longer runs on top of that as well. So have both of them, mix them up during the week. And because you need both of them, you need a good aerobic base, but you also need to be able to stop and start, which is more on your anaerobic threshold. So you need both of these things. And I was like, solid. And it was good. And it's like stuck with me. This was years ago. And it stuck with me.
Good. Now, the last one. Worst fitness advice you ever received?
Have I received bad fitness advice?
Can be from the internet, from YouTube, from some influencer.
I'm really bad at this right now. Because I don't want to just make something up. I actually want it to be like actually authentic. Oh my God. Has this happened? I'm trying to remember. I think someone was trying to coach me before and they were just telling me to do an exercise wrong, basically. This has happened.
How do you navigate? Okay, that's it with the rapid fire. Now I'm just curious. How do you navigate that? Like, you obviously know your stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes people in the gym don't know what you know, right? And they come to you and they're like, whoa, bro, you're doing this. You gotta, and then, like you said, and they'll tell you how to do something with good intentions, maybe, but it's probably wrong. Or maybe it's not wrong. Whatever it may be. How do you handle that?
Yeah, firstly, as a Christian, it's important to like handle everything with love, right? And like throw the ego to the side or the pride to the side of, oh man, I'm a fitness coach. I know what I'm talking about. I studied this in university. So for example, if someone's like, hey man, you're not going all the way down, I'll be like, oh, like, thanks, man. But I would say, but this is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. For example, an exercise in football would be like, we have pin squats. We also do like half squats. So there's some repetitions where you actually intentionally go halfway down.
Whoa.
Because your focus is on your acceleration. So it's not about going full range of motion in a squat, but now to focus on the acceleration, building that power in the quads to accelerate from that like half squat position, basically. Which is the position you're in a lot of time when you're sprinting. So that's why it's trained. And for the average gym goer, it's like, what is this guy doing? He's not going full range of motion or to his full depth in a squat. So if that was to happen, it hasn't happened to me. I've seen it on videos. I've seen it happen to other people. I would say, hey man, like, I get you completely. Don't worry, I can squat the full way down too. But right now, that's not what I'm training. And usually people are chill. I really haven't had bad experiences with people, but I know there are also like a lot of people with massive egos who are like, what are you doing? Da, da, da. Yeah. And I hope that if I was in that situation, I would be able to like diffuse it quite calmly so it doesn't escalate. Be like, hey, I like respect that. Cool. But this is what I'm training today.
Yeah.
Bye.
Composed and kind.
Yeah, exactly.
You just said, as a Christian, it's important to treat everyone with love. Mm-hmm. You're wearing a cross on your neck.
Yes.
Tell me more about that. Specifically, there's people listening to this who will, they'll hear the term Christian. They'll be like, oh, this guy, he likes Trump and he's against abortion. And
no.
What does Christian mean? The way you said it.
Yeah, I think there's so much bad press around Christianity, and I get it. I mean, around the bad press, like, I would also be like, F Christians too. It's like, what the heck, F you guys. Yeah. You guys suck. But Christianity to me, or what I believe it actually is in general, and should be to like most people if they've read the Bible, is it's almost like a calling to love everyone, regardless of what you look like, regardless of what you believe, regardless of where you are from or where you come from. It doesn't matter. We've been given a calling to love your neighbor as you love yourself, and God said this is the greatest command. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Or it says, love me with all your heart, and then love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's the greatest command we've been given as Christians to follow. And there's a lot of like nuances. I'm like, oh, it says this and says that, but like none of the other stuff doesn't matter. Nothing matters without love. And a lot of the things we see around Christianity today, like the propaganda and the bad press, comes around like the absence of love. And I'm like, this is not what Jesus died for. And this is not what I believe in or stand for or represent at all in any way, shape, or form.
Why does the bad press exist?
So let's say, for example, I mean, this is my belief, right? So I'm just going to openly say what I believe. And if you disagree with that, this is not like, I think you're wrong. I'm like, cool. It's completely understand. We're all entitled to our own beliefs.
Are you looking in the camera and saying that? That's so cool.
I think so. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Because I'm addressing the people. It's an important topic. Yeah. So, for example, Where was I going? My brain left me for a second.
Bad press.
Yeah, bad press. Let's say, for example, there is something that's really, really good. Let's say, let me do it this way. Let's say there's like a 1 million euro cash prize here. And it's like, hey, everyone, we can go and get this 100 million euro cash prize. And at the other side, there's like nothingness. But this guy is on his own at the nothingness, and he's jealous. He sees like, I can't get the cash prize. But I don't want anyone else to get the cash prize. So now I'm going to make it look like this cash prize isn't actually a cash prize. I'm going to make it look like it's something else. I'm going to make it look like it's like evil and trash and terrible. Whereas, so no one wants to go there. So I'm basically making an analogy for like Christ. So Christ is this cash prize. He's like, hey guys, I died for you so that you can have eternity with me in heaven. So you can be saved, basically. And the devil, he's on the other side, be like, oh shit, man, I missed out on this cash prize on Jesus, but I don't want to be on my own. I'm lonely. What is the best way? Instead of me pulling people to come here because no one wants to dip and chill with the devil.
Yeah.
How about I make the other side look really bad? How about I paint it in like controversy? Then everyone's gonna stay away. They're gonna shy away from that.
Right.
Not even like they're not gonna come up to me, but they're gonna shy away from that. And Christ says, he wants he wants all of us. He doesn't want just part of us.
Interesting. So it's misrepresenting what actually it's about. And that leads to bad press. It's because like if I can make this thing look bad, then people will think it's bad.
Exactly. Then they're gonna stay away. And this is the thing, especially now we're like, well, there's controversy here. I'm gonna shy away.
Yeah.
I don't want any stress. I don't want any problems.
It's actually true.
I don't want to get canceled.
Some guests on the podcast literally will come, and before we hit record, they'll be like, "Hey, don't ask me anything that's controversial." They'll literally say that.
Yeah.
And I need to. I still ask them a controversial thing, honestly, but I try to hold myself to not. But I just can't. Like, it's interesting, man. And that's what like people think we're talking about Christianity here. It's like controversial. I'm just interested. I'm interested in what. Look, you're young. And there's, for every one of you, there's hundreds of others saying, I don't need God or anything. My life is fun. I just want to like live for today, man. Carpe noctem or whatever. And, I don't need God. You said if they believe in Jesus, they'll be saved. And I'm thinking there's so many people who are just like, what do I need saving from, bro? I'm fine.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I find it interesting to talk about. That's why I'm asking you, because it's rare. What would you say? Would you say this has helped your fitness journey? Meaning, you mentioned actually in your intro, you said psychological fitness, but also it's not lost on me that we've spent a lot of time talking about physical health, but there's also mental health, and there's also spiritual health, right?
For sure.
And this whole Christianity thing, how does that play into the effects on your maybe physical health, but also spiritual health?
Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt you and myself. But I had another thing I wanted to add, which was, do you think it's important for somebody who spends the whole day on screens working like a 16-hour job to carve out time as well for spiritual health? And what might that look like?
Yeah, that's so good. Where do I start? This is a few questions here. In terms of how Christianity plays into spiritual health and physical health, for me, it's played like a massive part, actually. I think a big part that it's played, for example, in my physical health, in being a Christian, is I view my body as a temple. So the things that I consume, what I eat, what I drink, like I don't drink alcohol at all.
Wow.
Not that this is scriptural, saying, hey, don't drink alcohol, but this is a decision that I've made myself.
Yeah, because Jesus made wine.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a sin to drink alcohol, for example. But it's something I decided on. When I was younger, I was like, hey, man, I don't want to actually drink alcohol. I have goals as an athlete. And don't get me wrong, I've hung around a lot of friends who are partying and doing their thing, drinking. Cool. But I was like, hey, this is not what I want to introduce into my temple right now. Again, same with smoking. I don't smoke because, again, my body is a temple. And the scripture says, do not like defile your temple. So that's something that I see as important. That's one part of my physical health that it is like definitely improved for sure. I think Christianity has also helped me in moments when I felt like super down or like upset, where I would do a thing where I would literally go outside and I would just vent to God, and I would play football. I'd be kicking the ball against the wall. I would basically train. Well, not thinking about training, but I'm like, God, I'm freaking fuming right now. I'm pissed.
Wow.
This shit happened. What the heck? Like, my parents pissed me off. They just turned off my PlayStation. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. Basically. But it can kind of keep you grounded. And this is also scientific because in terms of sports psychology, there's a thing called positive self-talk and negative self-talk. Now, don't get me wrong, you're not talking to yourself, you're talking to God, but voicing these things, I cannot remember exactly what it does in your brain, but it has an effect to like calm you down.
Wow.
With positive self-talk. The same can be said about negative self-talk. It can have the effect to bring you down even more.
Right.
So this is like a thing the sports psychologists talk through. You know, while actually performing, some players talk to themselves out loud to keep themselves in the game, to keep themselves concentrated and focused. Something I also do sometimes too.
That's so interesting. You know, I've heard about gyms here in Berlin, but also around the world, where the instructors will like insult you to motivate you to do more. Barry's gym or something. I've heard about this.
That's a red flag, man.
Yeah. They said you go there and somebody just screams at you and they call you like, "Hey, you fat slob! Like you work harder, do better," you know. And this is like their thing. Is that an example of self-talk? Obviously, this is an instructor talking to you, but I've also seen guys working out where they're just like slapping themselves. They're like, "You weak piece of," you know.
Yeah.
Is that an example of self-talk where that's negative self-talk, but positive self-talk is maybe I can do this or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So like the guy slapping himself would be negative self-talk. The instructor would be, that's feedback. And that would be like, I don't know what the word is, negative feedback, because at that point it's not internal, external.
Yeah.
So that would be feedback and not self-talk or internal. And there's different types of feedback also, and different people respond to different feedback well and not well. So it's also important to understand what type of feedback your athlete responds best to. Like talking badly and talking them down, I don't know how effective that is.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I know people do it, but a lot of the time it has a negative effect. Like 90% of the time it doesn't have the effect or outcome that they're looking for, especially long term.
This is negative feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's just not like, it's tough mentally then too. It can become tough mentally too. And for the person receiving this, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
With Christianity, you know, you said you're kicking this ball around. You're like, God, I'm pissed. Whatever happened. Do you get feedback from God? Is he your coach this way?
Yeah, it's really cool. Because people say they hear from God, and we're like, a lot of the time when we say, "Oh, I hear from God," people are like, "Oh, wow, you didn't hear from God." This big lie saying, "Oh, my son."
Yeah.
For me, it's a little bit different in how I communicate with God. Everyone has their own way. Some friends I know, they get dreams and things, which is quite cool. I'm like, oh, nice. I wish I was getting dreams. But I have a cool like way we communicate, and a lot of the time is when I talk to him, it's almost like the answer comes into my head. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. So, for example, I'm like venting. I'm like, man, this is so annoying. This triggered me. And he's like, hey, man, it triggered you, but it's not the end of the world. But what about looking at it from this perspective? But what about this? And I'm like, man, so it's more, for me, it's more like thoughts that popped into my head to answer the question that I had.
Yeah.
And I know these are not like thoughts that are coming from me because I'm in my pissed off mood, you know. I'm like fuming.
Yeah.
So I think it's also quite cool. Okay. I guess that's how I would hear personally, how I hear from God.
Wonderful.
A lot of the time.
Well, hey, listen, I just wanted to stop here and acknowledge just the immense deposit you've made. I mean, clearly you know your stuff. You've been in it since you were 12 years old. And it shows. And I think above and beyond that, it also shows that you genuinely have the best interests of the listeners at heart. You're sitting here, a man full of love for people you haven't even met, saying, look, sitting is dangerous. It can hurt your hip flexors. It can hurt your posture. It can hurt your life. It can hurt your family. And you want good for all of us. And so the deposit you've made today is such a valuable one. And I just wanted to, on behalf of myself and all the listeners, man, thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for questioning, for being here. Thank you guys for listening. Really, it's an honor to be here. And as you said, like, I don't know the people I'm speaking with. I don't need to know you guys to love you. and to wish the best for you guys also, and the best quality of life, especially. Because I think that's so important, having a good quality of life, being able to play catch with your kids, like it's awesome. So I wish that for everyone. I'll pray that over everyone too.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks as well.
Thank you for joining my discussion with Isaac Akinsete. I hope you leave here changed. Honestly, I hope you got out of it as much as I got out of it. The guy is a fountain of information, but also positivity. And every time he speaks, I'm just like, whoa. And so I let us know in the comments how this has changed you, what your takeaways are, either on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, a great way to support it is to share it on social media. Share links, share excerpts, share whatever, even just text that touched you, because if something did touch you, then ideally it can also touch the lives of other people. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, a great way to support the podcast is to leave a review. Anything up to 5 stars helps. It helps the algorithm actually make it more discoverable. If you're listening on YouTube, then if you like the video, and maybe subscribe to the channel if you want future episodes, but also leave a comment with any feedback you have, any guests you'd like to hear from, any topics you'd like to cover. I take all that super seriously and I want to support you. So that would be a great way you can support the podcast and then enable me to support you. Isaac is accepting new clients. You can find his links in the show notes as well. He's also on Instagram and quite active there. So with all that, thank you again for joining this episode. Thank you for being a part of the podcast. And most importantly, thank you for your interest in engineering